Hello learners, welcome to Learn Microbiology. To another video on the series What Next After BSc Microbiology. In this video, we will be solving the mock test of Cat B Part 2. Let's get started with the first question. A substance exists in protonated form with a pKa 4.7. The percentage of the protonated form at pH 5.7 will be close to dash. This is the question we have to answer. Before understanding how to answer, let me quickly take you to this particular equation. As we asked in this particular question, there is a substance which is found in the protonated form with a pKa 4.7, and we have to find how much is this protonated form at the pH 5.7. Let us understand this with the help of this equation. Let us consider a substance A and this substance be protonated. Protonated means it is going to have a proton, and we all know the proton is nothing but H+. So this particular A, when it is have this hydrogen, then this is called as a protonated form. So this HA is nothing but the protonated form. Now, as we go on increasing the pH, what happens? There is a chance that this particular substance A will lose its proton, and then when it will lose its proton, it will become A minus. So the substance in this form which has lost the proton is called as the deprotonated form. I hope this much is clear. To solve this equation, it's a very simple formula we have learned previously, that is the Henderson-Hasselbalch equation, and we are going to solve according to that equation. Let us look at that. We all know the formula of Henderson-Hasselbalch equation. It says pH equals to pKa plus log of the concentration of A minus, that is the deprotonated form, to the concentration of the HA, that is the protonated form. We know the pH is given as 5.7. We will substitute the pH as 5.7. We know the pKa 4.7, and here the concentration of A minus and HA, that is the concentration of protonated and deprotonated form, is not known. Just solve this. To solve this, we know what we should take. We should take 4.7 to the right hand side. It will become minus. So 5.7 minus 4.7 is nothing but 1. So now we have got this particular equation. Now we know here it is log of concentration of A minus and HA. So what we will do, we will have to remove this log, then we will take this log on that side, and now we have to take the antilog of 1. And when we take antilog of 1, it is nothing but 10. So now we have got this, that the concentration of A minus divided by the concentration of HA is nothing but 10. Now, how to find antilog? We just have to follow a simple formula called as 10 raised to x, where here x will be the number for whose antilog you need to find. So we will solve it like this. 10 raised to 1 is nothing but 10. So that's hence the antilog of 1 is 10. Having understood this, let me also give you one simple concept which will help us to move forward in this equation. The concept is like this. We know that in a solution, the substance A will be in two forms. One is the protonated form, and other it will be the deprotonated form. But we don't know their individual concentrations. But we can be sure that the concentration of A minus and the concentration of H will be 100%, because the substance containing A will be found in two forms, and when we add both their concentration, we will get 100%. Yes or no? Now here we need to find the percentage of the protonated, that is the HA. We need to find from this equation, we have to find the concentration of HA. How we will do this? Having known this, we will just make a simple substitution. We will take our Ha to this side and we will find that concentration of A minus equals to the 100 minus concentration of Ha. Now since we have got the formula or the value of A minus, we will quickly substitute this value of A minus into this particular equation and we can further solve it. Over here. Here instead of A minus we will write what? We will write 100 minus H, that is 100 minus Ha and divided by this H over here, and we know the value is equals to 10. So this is the equation which we have got. Now how to solve this? We will take this Ha to here, it will become multiplied. So 10 into Ha, that is 10 into Ha will be equals to 100 minus Ha. And then what we have to do? We have to take this minus Ha to this side and it becomes addition. So 10 plus 1 Ha will be 11 Ha equals to 100. Now to find Ha, we have to now take this 11 to that side, that is then becomes, since here it is multiplication, when we take it over there it will become division. The concentration of Ha, that is nothing but 9.09. and the question it is asked, the answer will be equal to close to. So which will be close to? 10 is close but 9 is more close. So the correct answer will be 9. I hope this is understood, students. Just take down the Henderson-Hasselbalch equation in your notebook and you will have similar questions. You can solve it easily. Shall we move to the next question? Most of the dry mass in a tree trunk is originally derived from. Let us consider a small sapling. We all know as time passes by, this sapling will grow into a big tree, and you can see the big tree trunk which is having a lot of dry mass. And if I ask you what is the process which particular sapling undergoes, everybody know it is photosynthesis. And we have learned in our school itself the equation of photosynthesis, that is as over here. Over here, carbon dioxide, that is CO2 plus water, that is H2O, forms glucose and oxygen. I hope you remembered it right now, okay? Now, this particular tree bark is made of what? We all know the tree bark is made of a polysaccharide component which is called as cellulose, right? So, it is made of cellulose. Now, what is the cellulose made of? Cellulose is a polysaccharide made of glucose, right? So in the process of photosynthesis, this particular plant will undergo photosynthesis and it will produce glucose which will eventually form cellulose, correct? But now where is glucose formed from? Glucose is what? Carbon, right? So where this carbon comes from? It comes from the carbon dioxide. So in turn we can say this particular cellulose has formed from glucose which has formed from CO2. So what is the answer? Most of the dry mass in a tree trunk is originally derived from CO2. That is your answer. If the option CO2 was not present, we could have even said glucose is the correct answer. But since we have got CO2, then it should be the correct answer. Let's move on to question number 12. You have examined 10,000 cells in a culture and found that only 2 cells were in mitosis. Therefore, the mitotic index is. Okay. You might have done mitosis using onion root tip cells. You might have observed that not all cells were in mitosis, but few cells were in mitosis and they were also would have been in different stages. Do you remember the stages of mitosis? They are prophase, metaphase, anaphase and telophase. You guessed it correct. Now what is this mitotic index? It is a small equation. Mitotic index is the number of cells undergoing mitosis to the number of cells in the population. What population are we talking about? The population we are talking about is the number of cells you are examining. So this particular question says that you have been examining 10,000 cells and found that 2 cells were in mitosis. So simple enough. So how many cells undergoing mitosis? 2 divided by the number of cells in the population and the answer will be 0.0002. So where is that option? It is option number B. That is our correct answer. Students, Take down this particular equation of mitotic index in your notebook. If you have a similar question, it's very easy to solve. Let's move ahead to the next question. Let's go to question number 15. Colchicine treatment blocks the polymerization of microtubules, whereas Taxol blocks the depolymerization of the microtubules. Treatment with either colchicine or Taxol ultimately results in cell death. It is possible to achieve the same result even though the actions of both agents are opposite because they are dash. Okay, before understanding the question, let us first understand what is this microtubules. You might have heard about microtubules when you have studied mitosis. As we know, there were three types of microtubules involved in the metaphase and the anaphase stage of your mitosis. Here are they. In the metaphase stage, as we know that the chromosomes are aligned at the equatorial plane, and from this microtubule organizing center, various microtubules are formed, and some of the microtubules which are called as the kinetochore microtubule, it will attach to the center of your chromosomes, and then there are some microtubule which is called as the polar microtubule, which is going to attach to each other like this, and there are some microtubules called as the astral microtubules which directly originate from here. So we have now understood microtubules. Let us go one step ahead and understand what is this microtubules made of and what is this polymerization and depolymerization. Microtubules are made from a protein component which is called as the tubulin protein. It is called as the tubulin protein. So these small units of tubulin molecules combine together to form our microtubules. So when new tubulin molecules are added, then that process is called as polymerization. And when it is required, when there is a new microtubule forming from here, so the tubulin will get added like this, and then the microtubule will get extended, correct? So that is polymerization. Now what is depolymerization? Depolymerization is when this particular microtubule loses the tubulin and it will become shorter and shorter. Now when is that required? It is required at your anaphase, because at the anaphase we know this individual sister chromatid will get separated and they pull towards the poles, correct? So when they have to pull towards the pole, what does microtubule undergo? Microtubules undergo depolymerization. They will lose this tubulin components and they will get shortened enough, and hence your sister chromatids come to the different opposite poles, correct? Now this is a basic concept on the basis of which this particular question is asked. This question is not a direct question, it is actually an analysis question. So if we know this basic concept regarding microtubules, we can answer this question very easily. Let's read the question. There is a drug which is called as colchicine. It will block polymerization of microtubules, means it will not allow the synthesis of microtubules or the elongation of the microtubules. Whereas there is one more drug which is called as Taxol. This will block depolymerization of microtubules. Now what happens if depolymerization is blocked? There will be no anaphase, because this microtubule will never get shortened. Your chromosomes will not be pulled towards the opposite poles. Yes or no? Hence they say that treatment with either, if you treat colchicine or if you add Taxol to this particular cell, it will result in cell death. Right, because why? Because it cannot undergo mitosis. Simple enough. Moving ahead, it is also said it is possible to achieve the same results even though the actions of both agents are opposite. It means if colchicine was to block depolymerization and Taxol was to block polymerization, then two cell death occurs. What this means? First option, they block signaling from microtubules, they block transcription of microtubules, they block translation of microtubules, or they block mitosis. What will be the answer? Can you guess the answer? Very simple, it blocks mitosis. See, the question was so big. I know we never even go ahead to read the question. But the answer is so simple. We just have to know only one concept, that microtubules polymerization, depolymerization is involved in mitosis. And if polymerization, depolymerization is blocked, cell will die. Why? Because mitosis is blocked. Simple enough. Let's move to the next question. Question number 16. Cell division cycle is divided into 4 phases: G1S, G2M. Standard eukaryotic cell cycles are 12-hour long. Embryonic cell cycles are extremely rapid, having time duration of less than an hour. Which of the following phases are drastically reduced in the embryonic cell cycle? This is our question. We all know, students, that a cell cycle is having 4 phases. Let's just revise once again. We know the first phase is called as the G1 phase, where the cell is going to grow, and once the cell is grown enough, then there is the S phase, which is called as a synthesis phase, where our DNA is synthesized. It means replication of DNA takes place. So once the replication of DNA takes place, then our cell will move towards the G2 phase. What happens in this G2 phase? G2 phase, the cell will grow, it will prepare the cell for mitosis. And what is mitosis? That is equal division and distribution of your chromosomes, as well as also at the end of the mitosis there is also something called as cytokinesis, where your cell is going to get divided into 2 daughter cells. Correct? So we all understood now this. Now what they are asking is, this is the concept. On base of this concept, they are asking us some question. Now they are saying, if you consider eukaryotic cells, it will take 12 hours. Okay, so if you see this entire 4 cycles will take 12 hours, and then from one single cell you will get 2 cells. Correct? But if you just take embryonic cell cycle, the time is extremely rapid and it is less than an hour. Now they are asking which of this phase, they have got 2 options, 2 pairs of options, where we have to tell which 2 phases are reduced in the embryonic cell cycle. Now let's understand this. Out of these 4, we know there is, for embryonic stem cells, it divides rapidly. It means its DNA has to get synthesized rapidly, and the mitosis also has to take place rapidly. So definitely S and M phase cannot be reduced, because that is very important phases, right? But a lot of time, can you see here G1 phase, it's taking a lot of time, and similarly G2 phase. So those are called as the growth phases, and only those phases has to be reduced, only then your cell division will take place at rapidly. So the answer will be G1 and G2 phase. Got it? Let's move to the next question. Question 17. Recognition of intracellular pathogens in innate immune cell involves dash. To understand this, let's consider this particular diagram. If there is a red color one is the bacterium and this yellow one is your cell. Now, since it is innate immune cell, it is not able to specifically identify the pathogen, but it is going to identify certain pathogen associated molecular patterns, which are called as, you might have studied this as PAMs, P-A-M-P, that is pathogen associated molecular patterns, which are present on the surface of your invading foreign bacterium. It can be LPS, it can be flagella, it can be any particular protein. And to recognize these PAMs, these innate immune cells, they are having certain receptors, and these receptors are called as pattern recognition receptors, or it is also called as PRRS. Now this question is about the PRRS. They are telling to recognize these intracellular pathogens of in this immune cells which are innate, which of these receptors play a main important role. Now PRRs, there are 4 types of receptors in this PRRs. We have something called as TLR, that is your toll-like receptor, which is present on the membrane of the plasma membrane as well as the membrane of cellular organelles. Then we have something called as CLR. CLR are also present on the outer membrane. Then we have 2 receptors inside the cell. One is called as the NLR and the other one is called as the RLR. As we can see, TLR is also present in the endosomal membrane. So now this is the basic concept. Now let's move to the question. They have asked intracellular pathogens. First of all, intracellular pathogens means what? A pathogen which is present inside the cell. So if this is a pathogen, can you see here this present in the cell? Can you tell me which particular receptor will identify this? NLR or RLR, because they are freely present in the cytoplasm? Yes or no? So from these options, we have two options. Out of this 4, there was 2. Toll-like receptors also present and NLR, that is nod-like receptors are also present. So the answer will be nod-like receptors. Okay. Now why not antibody and natural killer T cells? Because antibody involves your B cell, right? And natural killer T cells is involved in your T cells. And we know B and T cells, they are not involved in innate immunity. They are involved in acquired immunity. So definitely, see, this is such a small basic concept. If you know, you can easily answer this question. I hope it is understood, students. Let's move to the next question. Question number 19. Discontinuous replication is a result of which property of DNA? We have learned from our lower classes that DNA replication is discontinuous. DNA has 2 strands and both the strands of DNA gets replicated in different form. One is our leading strand which gets replicated as a single unit, but lagging strand replicates in pieces which are called as Okazaki fragments. I hope this is all you all know. Okay, this particular diagram is very big for you for understanding. So let me just look here, over here. Can you see this particular small bubble, replication bubble? Okay. So see, one of the strand which is called as the leading strand, this particular strand here, it gets replicated directly, right? But what happens to the lagging strand? It gets replicated in pieces. Hence we say the DNA replication is what it is, discontinuous replication. Now can you guess because of which property our DNA replication is discontinuous? Is it because of complementary bases? Because bases are not at all involved in replication, okay, because they doesn't affect replication. Whatever the basis will be, that particular the complementary one will be added to it, so it is not a problem. Charged phosphate group, again there is no involvement of charged phosphate group. Even whatever maybe it's not going to affect your replication. Even see the anti-parallel nucleotide strands, yes, definitely. Why this happens? Because one strand of our DNA is from what? It is from 5' to 3' direction, while the other strand it is from 3' to 5' direction. Because of this it happens, and since replication always goes from 5' to 3', here the replication will start at this strand which is at 3' OH. Your first nucleotide attaches to this 3' OH and then it will go ahead like this in the leading strand, and for the lagging strand it will go and forming these pieces over here, right? So the answer will be anti-parallel nucleotide strand. Again the 5-carbon sugar, that is our ribose or deoxyribose sugar, is not going to play a major role in this, okay. So discontinuous replication is because of the anti-parallel nucleotide strands. Let's move to the next question. Question number 20. Primers are synthesized where on the lagging strand? Again a similar question on the same concept. At the 5' end of the newly synthesized strand, at the 3' end of the newly synthesized strand, at the beginning of every Okazaki fragment, or at multiple places within an Okazaki fragment. Let's have a look. We know that lagging strand synthesis is discontinuous, means there is more than one primer which is going to be formed. So where this primers form? See, you can see over here, if you see, this is our red color one, which is nothing but our Okazaki fragment, and you can see within each of this Okazaki fragment there is a primer synthesized, and this is not going to happen at one place because this particular primers are going to synthesize at multiple locations. Hence your correct answer will be T, at multiple places within an Okazaki fragment. Okay, so I hope this is understood. Let's quickly move on to the next question. Before that, I like to tell you, since 2 questions were asked on replication, just go through, consider this DNA replication topic as important, and you just read about it or watch a short video on this animation you can watch in YouTube, and note down few important points. You can learn the function of this particular DNA polymerase 3, DNA polymerase 1, ligase, RNA primase, etc. etc. Okay, because similar questions can be asked on this topic. Let's go to the next question. Question number 20. Which one of the following is the difference between the core promoter and the regulatory promoter. If you have studied about promoter, we know that there are two types of promoter, not two types actually. Most of the sequences, the promoter region has two particular region. One is the core promoter region where exactly your polymerase enzyme is going to bind, but there is some regulatory promoter region where some enhancer molecules can bind and they can allow your polymerase to attach properly to this core promoter. Okay, so now let's go to the options. We have to find what is the difference between this core promoter and regulatory promoter. Only the core promoter has consensus sequence. We know core promoter has common sequence. You might have heard about Tata box, right? Even your regulatory promoter can also have consensus sequence. Next option, the regulatory promoter is farther upstream of the gene. Yeah, this usually happens. Let me just take you towards one particular diagram for an understanding. Okay. Can you see this green color ones are your gene which is going to get transcribed, and upstream to that, this yellow, we are having a core promoter which is having a consensus sequence called the Tata box, and then upstream to that you have a sequence which is called as the upstream enhancer sequence, where it is nothing but your regulatory promoter. So this yellow one is a core promoter and this grey one is a regulatory promoter where certain transcription factors and certain enhancers is going to bind. Okay, and what happens once it's bounded, can you see how this particular DNA gets bent over here such that your regulatory promoter have an access to your RNA polymerase. So see, that is what we studied, right? So now if you see this regulatory promoter is farther upstream of the gene, yes, it is upstream, correct. Next option is asked, transcription factors bind to the core promoter, transcription activator molecules bind to the regulatory promoter. Definitely, you all know that transcription factors always bind to the core promoter, while transcription activator molecules are present, they bind to the regulatory promoter. So we can say the option 2 and 3 both are correct. Let's move to the next question. In the TRP operon, what happens to the TRP repressor in the absence of tryptophan? It's a very direct question they have asked. If you know TRP operon, you could have answered it right now. But for you, I'll go for a quick revision of this TRP operon. Okay. As we know, in lac operon was negatively induced. Here, TRP operon is also negatively induced. Well, lac operon used to synthesize certain gene products which helps in the breakdown of lactose, but in TRP operon, the gene products which are formed, they help to develop or they help to synthesize tryptophan. Okay, so can you check this operon? There are here this green color ones, E, D, C, B, A. All these are nothing but the structural genes, 5 genes which produces 5 different proteins which are important for synthesis of tryptophan in the cell. Okay, this is clear. Now can you tell me when a particular cell requires tryptophan? When it has large amount of tryptophan residue or when it is in absence of tryptophan? Definitely, right? Absence. When the cell is not having tryptophan, only then the cell needs to synthesize tryptophan, and only then we require that this TRP operon should be active. Correct. So whenever the cell, so we can just put it like this, I can say, so if the tryptophan or the TRP level is low in the cell, only then the operon will be active. Correct. And if TRP level is high in the cell, then there is no need of synthesizing additional tryptophan, this TRP operon will be off. So I hope this this is something which is just opposite to your lactose, because in that when lactose is high, even the operon will be active. Okay, there is some difference here. Okay, coming back to this, just have a look here. This is actually your regulatory region. This is your promoter region P. Over here where your polymerase enzyme is going to bind, and here is your operator where who is going to bind, your repressor is going to bind, and along with this has a leader peptide is also present in case of tryptophan operon. Since this question is not about this leader peptide, I am not discussing that in detail, but I will recommend you to go and read about it because it is important, because in TRP operon there is one more important feature called as attenuation. You can read about it later. Okay, now let me check about this repressor. Now this repressor is this blue color one, and it is synthesized by a gene called as TRPR, which is somewhere upstream to your TRP operon. So it is not a part of TRP operon. Okay. Now this particular gene will synthesize a gene product which will be properly folded to form your TRP repressor. Students, just have a look properly at the structure of this TRP repressor. Now this TRP repressor is always off mode or inactive. Okay. But when there is tryptophan in the cell, this tryptophan molecules, when it bind to your repressor, then your repressor becomes active. Again, this is also a difference between your lac operon and TRP operon. In lac operon, if the lactose bind to your repressor becomes inactive. But here, if your TRP binds to your repressor, the repressor becomes active. So when the repressor becomes active, it will go and sit on your operator region, blocking your space for your polymerase enzyme to sit on the promoter and core for the gene. So if tryptophan is present in the medium, it will bind to the repressor will bind to operator, and no transcription. I hope this is understood. So whenever the cell there is a very low amount of tryptophan, this repressor will not have much of this tryptophan to bind to it. It will be remaining inactive, and then it cannot bind to operator, and hence the tryptophan operon will be active. The question says, in the TRP operon, what happens to the TRP repressor in the absence of tryptophan? We just said, if there is no tryptophan, it cannot bind to repressor, and then repressor is inactive. Repressor is what? Inactive. Now as we studied right now, that if the repressor is inactive, then what happens? It cannot bind to your operator. So transcription will take place. Let's go back to the options. It binds to the operator? No, it cannot bind to the operator. It cannot bind to the operator? Yes. And transcription takes place? Yes. That is the correct answer. It binds to the regulatory gene? Definitely repressor cannot bind to regulatory gene. And repressor transcription bind to regulatory gene? Okay, so this cannot be the correct answer. So we have got the correct option, that is option B. So in the absence of tryptophan, TRP repressor cannot bind to the operator, and transcription will take place. Hope this is clear. But just go further and read about this tryptophan operon. And now I would like to say thanks for watching this video. In the next video, I will be solving many more questions of this GATE entrance examination. I will also make a further video regarding your section A questions. So like this video and share it to your friends who are preparing for this exam. Thank you so much.